Hello, BookTube. It's Thursday. I'm here to do a tag. It's quite a long tag. It's the Somewhat Autobiographical book tag created by uh, Book Time with Alvis. And I've been seeing it going around. I've seen it on James Holder, Steve Donahue, and others. It's a long one, so let's get to it. I'll try to go through as quick as possible. Number one, what was the number one best-selling book, fiction and or nonfiction, on the day you were born? Have you read them? And obviously, I had to look this up in ancient tomes, but I did find a listing, the New York Times bestsellers, and funny enough, both of them for fiction and nonfiction I have read, and it's the only book on that list that I have read. The number one fiction, it was The Source by James Michener, and I've read that twice, independently the first time, and then as part of a class in university. So that was quite interesting. And the nonfiction was In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, and I'd read that as well. Number two, what are some books, series or standalone, that immediately spring to mind when you think of your childhood? Farley Mowat, Owl in the Family, I think it was it. Lost in the Barrens, a collection of short stories, if I remember right, of sort of, adventures on the high seas by James Masefield, and quite sure, so I enjoyed Jack London, some stuff, but I'm not sure which ones, but remember enjoying Jack London. Um, Number three, and that's sort of pre sort of 10-year-old, I guess 10, 11 years old. Uh, Number three, school days are the best days of your life, apparently. Are they? But there you were forced to read some books you maybe wouldn't have chosen for yourself. Which did you enjoy? Well, I think the ones that I enjoyed, I would have chosen for myself eventually. But there was only three that I enjoyed out of all those. Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which everybody else hated. Um, Macbeth, which I did three times. I think it was, I forget what it was now. It was like I did it in the regular school, and then I took a summer school English class, and they did it again. And then in the next year I took my next English class, and they did uh, Macbeth again. So I did it three times in a row, and then Hamlet. So I enjoyed those, but again, they were not ones everybody else seemed to hate. The ones that people seemed to like was like, or some of them did, was like Wuthering Heights, The Great Gatsby, and I just abhorred. Just thought they were horrible. So um, that sort of leads into the fourth one here. Were you independent or part of a pack at school? Did you join in the reading fads of the day or do your own thing? Well, I did my own thing, basically. I was not part of a pack. And if there was any reading fads, I was unaware of them completely. Number five, as you moved into your turbulent teens, can you remember your first experience encountering sex in a book? I remember reading a Victorian erotica novel, which was practically pornographic. I tried to look up the title, but I couldn't find it. I found a few things that might have been it, but I'm not sure. But yeah, it was a Victorian novel. Um, Number six, what were some of the first kinds of nonfiction you encountered? Well, I guess National Geographic, and I think one of the first things that I read was like a biography of David Livingstone, and I'm quite sure it was by Elizabeth Huxley, and then reading some other stuff about David Livingstone, his explorations. Yeah, I think that was more or less it. And I think probably something about Charles Chaplin at the time because I enjoyed him. Uh, Number seven, whose bookshelf was more fun to raid, Mum's or Dad's? My dad had a few books, but I don't remember anything that was there at all. How diverse is your library? This is number 8, and this is a big list. I do have antiquarian books, which is a large part of my collection. Um, I have some arts and photography, biography, mostly um, um, film biography and literary biographies. Business, finance, law, not really. Calendars, diaries, and annuals. Got some Victorian annuals. Quite a few diary collections. Children's books, no. Comics and graphic novels, not to speak of. I've got one here, little graphic novel. I think it is, or it's a collection that's been bound by J. Michael Straczynski because he created and wrote Babylon 5. So I was interested to see when he started working in comics to see what his output was like. Computing and internet, no, not at all. Crafts, hobbies, and home, not really. Crime, thrillers, mysteries. Crime, if you're talking about true crime, then a little bit, but only Victorian true crime, basically. Crime fiction, yes, and that's along with mysteries, quite a bit. I've gotten into that over the last 6, 7 years, maybe a little more. I'd say the last decade. Thrillers, not really, never been a fan. Education, studies, and teaching. History of education, yeah, and some history of universities or schools. I got some. Erotica, no. Fiction, yeah, all sorts. The aforementioned mystery and crime fiction, Victorian, sort of English literature, French literature, the smattering of a whole bunch of stuff like that, and science fiction. Food and drink, not really, other than a couple books on sort of gin and a few things like that, whiskey. Um, Food, not much really at all. Foreign language study and reference, not really at the moment. Health, family, and lifestyle, not really. History, yeah, quite a bit of history. African history, South African history, particular and more specific. Zulu War history. British history, mostly early 17th century up to about Second World War. Um, Ancient history, a smattering now. History of transportation in the UK. Sort of that includes roads, carriages, early cars, about as newest I go. The railway, trains, canals, even walking trails, horses, as conveyance, shipping, coastal shipping, and the history of London, and horror. Yes, mostly ghost stories, which I really like. Preferably short story ghost stories, but even novel length is fine. But I'm few on. I have a few of those, so like it's very short. Humor, mostly P.G. Wodehouse. I have the complete Everyman Woodhouse in hardcover, which is in a cabinet beside this here actually. Um, it's behind this lot, which I can't get to at the moment. LGBTQ plus books. Uh, Not really. Well, like I've got books that have um, gay characters in, but I don't think of them any different than whatever genre that they go into. Like if this mystery or literature. Mind, body, and spirit. No, unless you talk the whiskey for spirits and gin. Music, stage, and screen. A little bit of music. Would like to get more on sort of medieval music, a bit of classical, some opera, and I like to get, but I only have a little bit of early jazz and blues. Um, Stage, a little bit, not a lot. Screen, yes, quite a bit, about 2.5 bookcases or more. Politics, philosophy, and social sciences, a little bit as mixed up sort of in other areas. of history, essay collections, and stuff like that. Reference, mostly this year, the 60 volume Dictionary of National Biography. Religion and spirituality, not really anything on spirituality, a little bit on religion. Romance, no. School books, no. Science fiction, yes. A little bit. Trying to get more again. Back my collection. Fantasy, no, not really. Not been into fantasy so much. Science, nature, and math. Yeah, I've got some science in nature, about 3, 4 shelves full. Math, not really, unless it comes into some of the sort of my history of science stuff. Sports, hobbies, games, not really. Travel, exploration, yes. Mostly African exploration. University textbooks, no. Young adult, no. Question number 9. What type of books do you find difficult to discuss? I can't think of really anything that comes to mind. I think I can discuss anything as long as I understand what I've discussed, what I'm going to discuss. Number 10. In what way do your life experiences and emotions shape your choice of reading? I don't know if it really does that much. I suppose for history wise, I'm more interested in sort of social history, sort of working history, and that kind of thing, rather than sort of the upper classes or kings and queens. Find those interesting, but not so much, and that could be because I'm not in that realm. I don't know. Number 11, in much the same way as your taste for food changes, so perhaps does your taste in books. How would you say your own reading tastes have evolved over the decades? I don't know if evolved is the correct term for myself, but it has changed to a certain extent into different areas, and I've left a few behind. Um, One of the ones that I started out with was sort of like, like I said, David Livingstone, and that's still an interest in mine. It's waned at times, but it's come back, but it's always been there. And I've always had books on African history or African exploration. Ancient history, that's waned, but it's coming back slightly. I'm picking up some books on it, not so much in the reading part of it yet. Um, let's see what else. Science fiction sort of had waned for quite a while, and sort of getting back into some of it now. Um, yeah, I think that's sort of it, and sort of what's taken place is sort of is sort of the mystery and crime fiction. I never was much for reading it. I enjoyed watching sort of crime drama, but and crime mystery shows, but it's only within the last decade that I've started enjoying reading actually books. Um, I think film is another one that sort of has stuck around for quite a bit. I've had an interest in film, reading about film since the 80s, I suppose, and sort of is just growing more and more. And it's still there. It happens, but not maybe as much as it did at times, but it's still there. So, yeah. Number 12. Unfortunately, we all feel down at certain times. Have you got a go to book to raise you back up? Not a specific book. I used to, I don't know if it's when I was down. It was sort of, I needed something a little more lighter than, say, what I was reading. And I would always pick up a P.G. Wodehouse um, or something like that, or John Mortimer's Rumpole. Now I sort of, when I do that, I pick up mystery more than anything. Number 13, if you have to choose one book or author to represent each decade of your life, who or what would they be? The books should be ones you read in that decade, not necessarily published in that decade. Um, hmm. Well, I'd rather do it like because it gets a few more books in if I do sort of, calendar decades rather than my age decades. 1970s would be the Elspeth Huxley's David Livingston. During the 80s, it would probably be C.P. Snow's Strangers and Brothers series. During the 90s would be P.G. Wodehouse, even though I'd known him prior to that, but I think I really got into him after I think it's the ITV series, Jeeves and Wooster with Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. The 2000s would be rediscovering and George Orwell. The teens. Can't think of anything for the teens that sort of has jumped out. Oh, for the teens, yeah, I'd probably say, well, it's not a specific book, but the genre would be, yeah, mystery, sort of crime fiction. That's when I started jumping into that. And the 20s here, nothing yet, nothing whatsoever. I haven't read anything that's sort of defining anything at the moment. Number 14. Of course, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but how do you feel when someone says reading is boring, and what would you say in defense of reading? Well, to each their own, basically, but I usually find out what they like, and most of the times it's sports. And my saying, well, if you think reading is boring, for me, watching sports would be like, sawing my leg off with a rusty saw. And I'd find more enjoyment in doing that than watching the sport. So, yeah, that's my answer. Um, Number 15. What was the number one selling book on the day of your most recent birthday? Fiction or nonfiction? Have you read them? And that's just in the last few weeks, but I haven't looked, but I can guarantee the answer is no, I have not read them. I won't even probably have ever heard of them, sadly, but that would be the most likely thing. So anyway, there is the Somewhat Autobiographical book tag, and I will leave you there, BookTube. I'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with my Friday reads. And I still have other videos that I need to do, film ones, stuff. But I've been spending more time reading this week. So I'm pleased at how things are going. But we'll discuss that tomorrow. Anyway, have a good evening, BookTube. Goodbye.